All right, don't know what happened there, but we lost connectivity. Luckily, I'm still recording with ScreenFlow, so we didn't lose anything that I was saying. And I was lucky enough to hear the little ping to tell me that we dropped, right? So everything's good. So we're back up with this next recording. So we're talking about this. We're talking about some of these structures. So again, we have a public class label frame, which extends the JFrame in this particular case. And we're making a call to the superclass. And remember, the superclass, because label frame extends the JFrame superclass, label frame is a JFrame. And because it's a JFrame, then it has all the properties of the JFrame. So I can say set layout as opposed to, that doesn't really exist in this class. Like the label frame doesn't include set layout. JFrame includes set layout. And I could have used, and I like to use this keyword to kind of talk about how it's part of this class. Some people don't like the this keyword, especially in Java, because they see it clutter the interface. They go, well, I don't really like this. You don't need to use it because we know that set layout is part of JFrame. And if I put this in front of it, it's explicit. I don't need to be explicit. I can be it's implied that it's this, and it's perfectly fine. I still would like you to use the this keyword as we continue through our time together, only because it's easier for beginners to understand. By this keyword means it's part of our, it belongs to the class. Now label frame in this example here, this label frame that we're talking about is the constructor, right? Here's the constructor. And I'm calling the superclass constructor, right, and sending in testing jlabel, which is one of the things in the superclass constructor is it takes a title, right? That's what it does. And if you notice, we're using FlowLayout. We're going to talk about layouts in a bit, of what that is. And we're setting up a couple of labels. When I say label 1, which I've defined 3 labels, label 1, label 2, label 3, could I not have made an array? Yes, I could. It's getting onto. It's getting close to Halloween. So I'm going to make it so like arrays or like the horror story, right? We're going to talk about, right? Yes, we could. We could make an array of JLabel objects, right? Yes.
Why are they declared as final?
Well, the reason why is because what is final? Remember what final is in Java? It's a constant, right? So we're never going to change the actual object itself, right? Final just makes it so that it's unchangeable, right? The label is going to be a label. I'm never going to change the label, right? I'm going to change the text box, but not a label. So therefore, it's okay to make some of those final.
Still change the text inside.
I could, but in this particular case, what they've decided to do is make them so that they're unchangeable. You don't have to. All right. And if you notice, we added an icon. We used the get resources, but we couldn't use the get class. Get class didn't work for us because the way this is written, get class points to the resources in the class. We have to use the name of our class, right? And that's how we did it last time. And if you look at the code that did from the example, and I'm just going to bring up the example code from last day, which was week 6, lesson 6, it's up on GitHub already, right? And if I look at the source files, let's take a look. I think I may have had a few examples here. So here's my program.java file. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating a new example frame. Now this example frame, as an example, this program uses, without creating a special frame, a class that's inheriting frame, I'm just creating a new example frame. Now example frame itself is a class of its own. Here's example frame, right? So example frame extends JFrame. It has its own JLabel, which I haven't made final, right? An icon and so on. And I'm making a call to the superclass to send in example frame. And then what I'm also doing here is I'm using a new FlowLayout, and I'm sending in this cube. Remember the cube resource that I have? And under assets, I created a cube ping file, right? Looks like, bring up fireworks, like this, right? And that'll kind of show to the screen as I use assets, /assets cube.ping, and I use my get class, get resources to access it. The right path. I could have also, instead of get class, I could have also used example frame dot get resources and so on. That's possible as well. But at the end of the day, this totally works. And again, I'm using just this made-up class. One thing I can do is, because the source code complies with Window Builder, right, the way it's been written, I click Design, the Design tab, and then it'll parse it and open up the design in Window Builder, right, which shows me what it's going to look like. But here's something. Hey, where the hell is my image? It's not here, right? And that's the difference between what we see here live. It's not what you see is what you get when I program, right? Compared to if I drag and drop. If I drag and drop the image here, you would see it, right? So Window Builder is great as a learning tool. It also is a good place to see all of our components. But the way I'd like you to think about things is, let's see if we can code things from scratch and how they're going to appear. Okay, a couple of important things also is, you know, when we, this default close operation, we have to define that. And we also have to make the window visible. And we do that in our driver class, right? So we set visible to true for all of our windows, which are frames. If we don't do that, even if we create the object, then, you know, an example, this is we're kind of setting up a dialog, a J dialog, a default J dialog, and so on for my frame. And that's why, by the way, I closed my whole window down. Let's get rid of that, get rid of this thing. If I do this, if I actually run this code, it'll close my whole code, my whole Eclipse down. Sometimes, right? We don't want that, so we're just going to get rid of that. I want to run it like this, and if I run this thing, let's see if I can run as a Java application. I get this window that pops up right here, and then with a little first name, there's a kind of a big icon, and then if I close this off, sometimes it closes my Java file off too, right? When I have that other operation in there. But it's pretty good, and what I've done is I've created this new dimension, a dimension-based object. And if you look at my imports, there's quite a few of them, eh? Here's something, if you see them underlined like this, like for border layout and for J option pane and so on, I don't have these things in here, so I can certainly just remove unused import. In fact, if I click Organize Imports, all of them that I don't need are gone, right? If I still run this thing now the way it is, still get this, right? And my imports over here, if I go to here and, you know, as an example, I look at this as underline my assets. If I, you know, kind of hover over it and it says, you know, organize imports, it'll organize my imports nicely over here. And organizing, what it does, it also puts them in order, which is what we like to do. Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation for a second. So again, we're talking about the class here. Okay, and this here, what we're doing with this one, this is our driver class. And what it's doing is it's calling it just like we did. We set the size, we set visible, we set default close operation here. We could also do it in the code, right? So we don't have to do it in here. All right. So again, I'm not going to go through all the things in the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint's up online. Let's talk about FlowLayout a little bit, because FlowLayout is what we did, but we didn't really talk about what it is. So it says, okay, we place GUI components in a container from left to right in the order in which the program attached them to the container. When there's no more room to fit components left to right, components continue to display left to right on the next line. And that's what FlowLayout does. So I can continue to add stuff to FlowLayout as an example, right? And if the container is resized, FlowLayout reflows components to accommodate the new width. So that's pretty cool. That's a really kind of cool layout. It's almost like that with that whole responsive design idea that we have nowadays with different kind of windows and different screen sizes, right? Now, typically, you know, Java runs inside of an application inside, you know, a Windows or Mac or Linux, but the idea behind FlowLayout, it reminds me a lot of this responsive design stuff. So let's take a look at a new application. Make a new one for today, right? Just so we're all on the same page and gives you guys some good practice, right? So I'm going to make a new, let's try this again. We're going to make a new Java project, right? A new Java project, which we're going to call today's project, COMP228, and it's going to be lesson 7, right? Maybe do it properly, Tom. There we go. And press finish. So there's our lesson 7 is, you know, kind of, if you look at it right now, lesson 7 is just got COMP228 in it, right? Just save this piece, close this off and close this off. And if I look inside the lesson, there's nothing. So I got to add my driver class. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go new, I'm going to class, and we're going to just call this program. I'm also going to use my public static void main method and press finish. So we've got our driver. Okay, cool. Let's add this into GitHub, right? And you know what? I'm going to do it here. I'm not going to go and do, maybe we don't do command line at all today, as something new. So I'm going to go back into GitHub. Here I am. And you know what? I got to better put this in the right place. I have a problem doing that sometimes. So I'm going to go into Centennial College and press plus, new repository. Make sure that Centennial College is chosen, Tom. And then put in COMP228, lesson 7. And press create repository. Hey, I need this little URI for Java, right? I'm not going to do any of this stuff or use command line. I'm just going to do it strictly in here. So how do I do that now? Well, I want to click on my project, right click, go to team, right, and go to share project. Now I know that my COMP228 is inside its own folder, inside my users, Thomas, courses, COMP228, right? I want to create a repository here because right now none exists. If I kind of pull this down, there's other repositories that I can use as well, but that doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to use or create repository in the parent folder of the project because my parent folder of the project is my workspace. So I would not want that. I just want to create one that's just the project itself. So I'm going to click create. And I have to choose the project, the place where the project exists, right? So I'm going to kind of browse to that project, make sure that we're in the right place, right? Because that would be bad if we're in the wrong place. So I'm going to kind of go up one. I'm going to go to Thomas, and then courses, if we can get to it. There it is. How about we alphabetical, use sort by alphabetical as sorting from. I don't know what I was sorting from there. Yeah, we'll go to courses, and we'll go to COMP228. There we go. And sometimes when I go to workspace, what happens is I get the wrong thing. But here I see my workspace was just lesson 7. Oh, man. See, I know why it's on the wrong order because I put an extra space in there. So let's cancel that for a second because I don't want that to happen. Hold on a second. Let me just rename this one. Sometimes it happens. I get this extra little space in there, and then like right here, after the COMP228, I added an extra space for whatever reason. There we go. Let's try that. Now it's at the bottom where I wanted it. Okay, so let's do that one more time. So right-click, team, share project, go back in there, click create, go to browse, go back up to Thomas, go back down to courses, which is somewhere down in the C's. There we go, courses, COMP228, and hit workspace, and under there it's number 7. There we go. So this is the place I want to open up my files and create it, right? So I'm going to press open. And if you notice, there's the path, COMP228, Java programming, COMP228, lesson 7, and press finish. Okay, now it says, hey, cannot move the project, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to move the project. I just want to create the thing. I want to press cancel. It's just my trick. And now you see that I have this, my GitHub is initialized, and it is here, but I have no head, which means I haven't made a commit, right? So I'm going to right-click on the project, go down to team, go to commit, we'll create a new commit. And I'm going to type in there my commit message is going to be initial commit or first commit, whatever makes sense to you, right? I'm going to choose the files I want to include, my class path, my git ignore, my project, all this kind of stuff. I want to add all those things in there. And then I want to click commit and push. And when I do that, it's going to say, meh, I don't know where you want to commit and push to. But I do know where it is because I have this URI that I got from GitHub, this place, right? So I'm going to take my URI and copy it in there. And then, that's not what I wanted. I got to go to GitHub. And let's just copy into the clipboard, go back and paste. And when I do that, now it fills in all the information for me, right? Okay, once I've got that going on, I can go next, right? Next, I'm just going to accept everything and finish. When I do that, it pushes everything up to GitHub. And for me, just as a check, I can refresh. And now in Centennial College, COMP228 less than 7, we have our little container for our stuff. All right, and if I want to add a README file, I can. But the challenge is what I want to do. This is people get into trouble. They add a README file first, and then they have to pull, but they can't pull because they don't have a folder. It's bad. So let's just do it now. So we'll add a README file, and we're going to call this COMP228 lesson 7 repo for Java programming at Centennial. There we go. So that's what the definition is. I'm going to add a new commit. Just going to accept the commit new file, which is going to make a new commit, right? Which is create my README and add this thing in. I'm one commit behind now, right? So I have to go back into my Eclipse, and I got to go in here, right click, and instead of going to push, I'm going to do a pull, which is going to sync up my repository that's on the cloud locally with me. If I was to try another commit now, it would be giving me an error that says, hey, you're one commit behind. What are you trying to do? Right? So let's pull. And it says, okay, we're going to move things forward. And we're getting this new README file. Are you okay with this? Yes, I am. And if you notice, here's my README file right here. And if I double click on it, I can actually get the README file right in here. I can actually see it. Okay? So I know I'm up to date now with my README file. And I know that I've committed to GitHub and I'm good. I've been a good boy. All right, let's continue. So what I want to do is I want to do this layout stuff again. That's why I did all this stuff for you. I want to do this FlowLayout, right? And I want to kind of do the same kind of idea, kind of explore FlowLayout, but I want to use Window Builder to do it, right? Let's try this. So I'm going to go back into my Eclipse. And what I want to do is I want to create a new folder, a new Window Builder. So if you look on the top left, if you've installed Window Builder correctly, Ravina, right, then what you should have is this. Swing. There's also SWT as well as other things, right? But let's just say I want to do this one, swing. Now I want to create a JFrame, right? That's the one I want to use. So let's just do that. It's going to ask me for the name of my new window. And we're just going to call this flow frame because we're going to do a flow layout, right? Here's my flow frame. It says the use of the default package is discouraged. We've always got that message. We'll talk about packages later on. And it says use advanced template to generate JFrame. So it's interesting. What does the advanced template do? We don't know. Let's press finish. And I've got my JFrame, right? Now I can go into design and I've got this same window that we saw before with my kind of floating window in here and stuff. And we're going to modify our JFrame. But one thing I want to note is that on the left, I have something called content pane. And content pane is actually a JPanel. I don't want a JPanel. I want a flow layout. How do I do that? Let's get rid of this content pane. So I'm going to right click here in Window Builder and delete. Okay, so I have no content pane in here. I have something else called get content pane, which is a container, right? What if I just delete that too? Can I? No. Here's one thing I can do though. I want to go to layouts. Here's my layouts. And I want to choose flow layout. The way we do things in Java and this is choose the layout first and then apply it somewhere. Like for example, if you notice here, I can't apply it to the JFrame, but I can apply it here. And I can apply it over here, the flow layout. See? Here or here. So all I've done is selected it once in Window Builder, and I can choose, see whenever you see the little plus come up, and you know it's safe. Let's do it on this side. Okay, now what's happening is our Get Content panel, which, if you notice, uses a flow layout, right? That's what's happening right now. Let's see how it affected our code. So I'm going to go back to our code. And if you notice here, we have this public static, what's called void method called main, right? And notice that we're also saying that this flow frame is a type frame, it's new flow frame. I want to do all this in my driver class. I don't want to do it here. This is just what Window Builder does. It makes this one self-executing class, almost like a static main method within this class flow frame. I don't want that. It's not bad. It's just not what I want, right? So let's get rid of it. So now if I wanted to, by the way, I could take this whole try catch block, which we haven't used before. But it's good to do this because what ends up happening is somehow if the frame can't be created, it'll give you an exception. We want to catch the exception. And we want to kind of use exception handling as much as possible when we can. So let's right click and cut this thing, this whole piece. Go back to our program.java file, right? And inside where it says auto-generated stub, let's put that in. Say paste. There it is. So we still have a new type, a new class we've created called FlowFrame, and we're creating a frame window. That's what it is. A frame is a window that's called FlowFrame. Okay, let's go back to my FlowFrame class and get rid of, right? Get rid of this main method because we don't need it anymore, right? I'm gonna get rid of this whole thing. And now I have this, my one method that I have that's left over, right? That says FlowFrame, and we set the default close operation as exit on close. We also set bounds to 100, 100. That's where it starts off. 450 by 300 is my window size. Let's change this 450 by 300 to 300 by 300 in code here. And if you notice, we're using this new flow layout, right, that we've called in with this get content pane, and we've used set layout, right? Here's a question: do I need to use get content pane set layout, right? Because if I go back to my PowerPoint, right, I just need to use the set content, the set layout here, right? Let's take a look, right? So here's our set layout, this new flow layout, right? It doesn't look like I have to use any darned get content pane, right? Let's try this out. Let's see if we can make it work without it. So I'm just going to go get rid of this and use intuition, just put in the this.setLayout method because setLayout is part of the JFrame superclass. And I'm using the setLayout as part of my FlowFrame class because FlowFrame is a JFrame, so I can use this setLayout properly. And also, if you notice, I say FlowLayout.center, and then I have something called 5, 5. Well, if you look at this thing, FlowLayout.center is an enum, right, that we're using to position things in the center, right? And then we have some other values here. So if I was going to do, just like get rid of this stuff for a second, unless we don't need it, just do one of those. But if I do FlowLayout, you notice some of the options that come up, right? Center, leading, left, right, trailing, or leading, I mean. I can't remember thinking about typography. And so on, right? So if we said FlowLayout.center, and then I also have this other way of putting in some other values. Well, how's that possible? Because new flow layout has it's a signature, right? A constructor signature. So let's just go here, and then if I open up the bracket here, if I go open brackets and press Control Space, I see that there's other options for my flow layout. One of them is just the alignment, which if I could put like flow layout.center, or I could put an alignment and then the H gap and V gap, right? Horizontal gap and vertical gap that's assigned to everything, right? If we just leave it like this, we'll leave it like this first, right, and save. And then let's see if we can still get the design, right? Because we mess around with this. Sometimes, the design doesn't know how to go through it, and it doesn't know how to parse the code. And sometimes we don't get a design view. Let's see if it does. Okay, here's our new layout, right? And guess what? We got the get content pane back, man. I didn't ask for no get content pane. I wanted a flow layout by itself, right? Let's go back to source code. Let's see if they added it in. Nope. Shows up though. Right, here's my get content pane. Inside my hierarchy here, right, it's showing my get content pane. Guarantee this may cause an issue, right, because that's what happens, right? Let's add in some labels because that's what we want to do here, and I want to show you how to do that. So here's layouts. Let's close off layouts, and we'll close off containers, and we'll go into components, the component section, and we'll click on the JLabel as an example. So I'm going to kind of close this off a little bit. And we'll open this piece up. That's all I'm doing. just from a visual perspective, it's sometimes good to understand how this all works, right? So I've got JTable, JTree, JTextArea, JButton, JTextField, JLabel. There it is. So I'm clicking on JLabel, top left corner, and if you notice, I can choose this. I can choose this, right? Let's do it over here in our view, right? And kind of put that in there. And here's my new label, right? Now remember what they said about flow, the flow layout. Flow layout allows me to continually put more and more objects in, and they'll appear next to each other until there's no more space, and then it'll go to the next line. Okay, that's what flow layout does. So let's put this in there. So we'll say, you know, first name will be our kind of our label, right? Here's something on the, if I want to control the label's font, right now it's the standard is Lucidas Grande 13. If I want to choose another font that's part of my system fonts, like let's say, for example, I'm going to look for something like Helvetica or something like that I like, right? So here's Helvetica Neue, right? This is kind of a very Apple-esque font that's been used everywhere, right? Open Sans is another big one that is being used by Google everywhere because of Google fonts, right? So you can certainly try and see if there's something like an Open Sans. But I'm going to use Helvetica Neue, and I'm going to make it plain, so it's not going to be bold. And there it is. There's Helvetica Neue. You may have that on your system, you may not. And I'm going to make it pretty big. I'm going to make it like 16, right? And then press OK. Yeah, so it's getting a little bigger, right? So that's the new Helvetica Neue, right? So 16 pixels here, and the different font. Let's see what it does in source code. How do I change the font in source code? All right, cool. Here's my J label. My J first label is label for LBL first name, which is a new J label, which I'm passing first name into as part of the constructor. So I need to do that. And here's something. I can use the set font method of my J label, and I'm also using a new font, right, called Helvetica Neue, and I'm setting my font.plain and 16. So this means when I have this new font, what am I doing here? I talked about this last time. I don't know if you remember. It's an anonymous object, and I want you guys to get used to using anonymous objects. We use them in JavaScript. We use them in C#. We use them in other languages, and we're going to use them here, right? So new font means I'm generating an anonymous object with no name, so there's no name for this object, but it's of type font, and I'm passing in some parameters into the font's constructor, the object's constructor. So I have an object, but I have no name for the object. It means I can never call this object again. Now, here's a question for you. Am I going to use Helvetica Neue with a font size of 16 again somewhere? Maybe. So it might be a good idea to set up a variable to hold my font, right? So that way my form can look the same every time, right? So all of my form elements, all my labels are going to use Helvetica Neue. So I might as well set up a kind of a an instance variable like that. Let's make it private. So we're going to set up a private a space for private instance variables, and we're going to call this thing private, and we're going to call this it's going to be of type font, right? Here's the font, right? Just like we have down here, it's type font. And we're going to say my font is going to be Helvetica Neue. I'm just going to call that. So we'll call it _ Helvetica Neue. And there it is. That's the first thing I want to put in. Right? So it's called Helvetica Neue, and I'm getting an error, right, for a second. But if you notice now, there's not an error anymore. One thing to note in my imports, because I use the font, I have my java.awt, which is the low-level font, low-level aspect of Java, right? Remember, there's two things. There's heavy components and light components. If you ever get tested. Heavy components, anything with AWT in front of them is like heavy components. They're low-level components that access the operating system itself, right? Light components are things that are used like with Swing. If you see Swing next to it, like this, JFrame, JPanel, and so on, those are lightweight components. And they use the heavyweight components as a back end. Okay, that's what I want you to think of it. Like,
why do they call them light?
Higher level. They're basically easier to use. They've been packaged for you. So you can use them. You don't use the low-level components because low-level components are heavier to use, heavyweight, right? Almost like Pro. It's the Pro way to do it. So you're gonna use AWT, right? Whereas Swing has everything built into it. Okay, so so this is cool. I've got a container called Helvetica Nui, and I want to, in my constructor, that might be a great place to initialize my stuff. In fact, all this work that I'm doing here, well, this part anyway, get pane, set layout. Look, hey, look, they changed the darn pane to get content pane set layout. I don't need that, but I'll leave it in there because Window Builder needs it for some reason, right? So let's say all this work before I get my label is all my initialization. So I might as well call an initialize method, right, to do that. So I'm going to kind of make a method down here, which we're going to make private, right? So I'm going to say private underscore, it's going to return void, initialize. And my initialize method, all it's going to do is initialize my stuff, like all this stuff, right? My flow layout, all that stuff. And I'll put it down here. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Well, alongside with this, after I establish my flow layout, I'm also want to establish my default fonts. So I'm going to kind of bring this up a little bit. See if I can get this up. Sorry, I know it's hard to see. But I want to put my default font stuff down here. And also, I want to call my initialize method here, this.underscore initialize. So it actually calls my initialize method. It kind of saves me the trouble of initializing. Right? So in my flow frame constructor, this is the constructor. So constructor, right, of my class, right? I call the initialize method. These are private methods. Again, I'm just using this annotation here so you know that I'm separating private from public methods. So it's the way I do things. You may have a certain set of ways of doing it for yourself, private methods. Just a good practice of having a certain form. Keep with the process. Keep consistent when you code, right? So people, when they look at your stuff, they may love it or hate it, but at least you're consistent, okay? All right, so this is the first thing. So I've got I need to add this Helvetica Nui in there, and I know I'm going to call it down here. So I'm going to call it, after this, I'm going to call this is my default font. I could have called this, instead of Helvetica Nui, which might be the right things to go, default font, right? Let's do that instead. Maybe that makes more sense. So I haven't used it yet, so I'll just go in there and just call it default font, right? My default font. What's my default font? So this.underscore default font is equal to new font, and I might as well just copy all this stuff here instead of copying it. Actually, well, we'll do it by hand, see what the options we get. So control space to see what my options are. And if you notice, I have font map, font string, style, and size. So it looks like this second constructor is the one we want to use, and there's other ones. So I want to use this one. So string, the name of my font, my style, and the size. So the name of my font is a string, Helvetica Nui. My style, font dot plain. So it's not going to be, as an example, bold or italics. And size, 16 pixels. Could have copied it, but it's okay. All right, cool. So I've done that here, right? So a default font is that. Now I can use it in my label. Instead of going this new anonymous object, I can just use my named object now. And I can use it over and over again. So I can say something like this. This.underscore default font. Okay. You're seeing that. All I'm doing is I'm defining it down here as a named object as opposed to an anonymous object, and I'm reusing it here in my set font. I'm going to do it only because, not because I don't like using anonymous objects, only because I can use the exact same font across different labels and across different text objects when I need to. Right? It's a better way of doing it. Less duplication of code and less anonymous objects. Okay. Let's also rename my label first name. I don't like the way they do it. Label first name, LBL first name, to first name label. I like that more. So I'm just going to kind of double click on this thing, right click, and in Eclipse I'm going to go refactor, rename, and we're going to call this first name label. All right, here's something, my first name label, right, people. this jlabel called first name label, as an example, which has, it's a new jlabel. Do I want it to be created in my constructor function, or do I want my first name label to be a private instance variable that I want to have in my collection of instance variables here at the top, where I can reuse it later on in my code if I ever want to access my label again. If I'm only going to use it once, it's okay. But I probably don't want to do it here in my constructor. At least I don't want to declare it here in my constructor. I might use it here. I might do one of these, like this dot first name label is equal to jlabel, right? I might do that, right? But I probably want to declare it up here. So let's try that. So I'm going to say private, right? And we're just going to call this, is it almost time to go? All right, take care. We'll do another minute or so, and then I'll stop recording. So private first name, it's of type jlabel, right? So private jlabel. Right, we're going to rename this thing called underscore first name label. So lowercase f, first name label, just like we normally do, right? And it's of type jlabel. I want to use this instead of this. I prefer that by far. So I'm going to kind of take this whole thing, copy it, and replace. And put the this keyword, this first name label, same thing here. Now this first name label is accessible everywhere inside my my class. Let me just fix up the errors here as I'm doing all this, right? Maybe with one of those, and one more on the bottom. I kind of did that last time, but I want to show you that again because I think I went a little fast last time. Okay, cool. All right, so I've got this object here, this first name label, and it's okay right now in the constructor, but I think eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of the constructor and something like initialize labels or initialize UI or create UI. I might create another method called create UI or generate UI that does all this stuff, creates a label, creates text boxes, does all this stuff, generates the UI for me, right? Because I don't think it should appear here in my constructor. I want to initialize my form, right? As an example, my little Java form, JFrame, and then set up all my things here. Let's save this thing, right? And let's see if it still works in Windows Builder. Click Windows Builder here, and let's see if it works. Yay! And if you notice here, look, you see that first name label is the variable name now, right? And I still use, this is interesting, my font is blank, right? My font is blank, right? So here's what it looks like here, okay? And I look at first name label, see how my font is blank, right? If I choose this, it looks like, as an example, I don't have an option, right, for saving it up. And this is where, I don't particularly like Window Builder for this reason, right? If I go back to source, I still have my font, didn't take it away, my default font, and it still uses my default font in my first name label. It just doesn't know what to do with it. Okay, but this is the way I would like to do it. Any questions around this stuff? Let's test it and then we'll go. So back to here, right? I'm going to press play. And let's see if we get our, see, we got first name. What's much bigger, it's first name, which is a larger label than what we saw in the preview, right? And it looks pretty good. If I close the close button here, it closes it up. Okay. So FlowLayout, I think that's what I want you to take away for tonight's lesson, right? FlowLayout allows me to add additional GUI components in there, and what it does, of course, is it continuously lets me add, and then it goes on to the next line, next line, next line. That's okay, but it may not give us FlowLayout, may not give us the control that we need, right? And here's a trick that I'd like to also tell you guys about. You can mix layouts. You can have a flow layout on the outside, and inside you can have some other kind of layout so that you can use both layouts, and the good things of both layouts take advantage of what the windows look like. Let's upload this to GitHub so we're on the same page. I'm going to right-click here, go back to team. We're going to go to commit, and I'm going to say added flow frame. Right? That's what it is. Okay, with flow layout. Okay. Commit and push. Yay, it's pushed up there. So you guys have everything. So next time we get together, week 8, I'm going to give you your assignment, and I'm also going to give you a makeup assignment for this array debacle, fiasco we had today in the exam, right? And it'll give you a chance to make up by doing an additional assignment if you wish. All right? And that's it for me.